welcome back. Well, let's turn away from the changes in the city of Joburg. We do expect a new mayor later this evening. Drama in eThekwini and in Ekurhuleni as well. But to the other big story today, the Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee deciding to increase interest rates by 25 basis points. The repo rate goes to 7.25%. The committee concerned about economic growth and particularly the impact of load shedding. This means the prime lending rate for commercial banks will increase to 10.75%. The Reserve Bank also saying it expects headline inflation this year to remain unchanged at 5.4%. That's slightly higher than what will happen in 2024 at 4.8%. For more reaction to all of this, more understanding of what is going to happen, Molefe Moate is the founder and CEO of Lifelizabeth Properties. He joins us now. Molefe, good afternoon to you. Do you appreciate the time? We saw during the pandemic, Reserve Bank dropped interest rates in emergency measure, so the rates went down, property prices went up. What's happening now?
Look, good afternoon to you and the listeners at home. Obviously, due to the hike, 0.25 is actually going to affect the market in a sense that people won't get. Remember, the higher the interest, it means the cost of financing the loan is high. So most people won't be able to afford to get access to loanable funds. So by that, it means that in terms of real estate, it might affect construction, for example. The demand of real estate in the market is going to lower because people cannot afford. It's going to be tough times. So obviously, there's double-sided on it. It's more like an equilibrium. The race shifts to the right, meaning that there's a certain target market that gets cut out because they cannot access the market. But we can now look at people, obviously, just like during COVID. As much as the rate was low, most people had cash and most people could actually, be financed to afford a comfortable home, unlike going to a smaller size. So in this case, you'll find that people that can afford maybe, for example, a 1 million house will have to opt probably for like an 800 or 700 because now the cost of financing is too high. So there's a certain market in real estate that is going to be a lot in the market in this case.
For a very long time, from the end of apartheid, really probably still until now, there was this huge momentum as people moved out of townships and into suburbs. And you see it particularly in places like Mondial, for example, south of Joburg, between Soweto. So you've grown up in Soweto, your parents, your community are still in Soweto. You don't want to be too far away. So you move into a place like Mondial. You're still comfortably near Southgate, but you can still you can still go to other malls. You can still go and visit your community on a daily basis, visit your children, whatever. Is that momentum now going to come to a slow? It's been going for a long time, pushed all of those prices up for a long time, but it's getting tougher and tougher to buy a house for people now.
Look, most people, they are downsizing, honestly speaking. So basically, if you look at your Mondio, before just the central part of the, the city, you find certain like middle class. So remember right now, if the interest went high, it's going to be difficult for them to actually be able to get the loan. So basically, even on that sector, moving from township, going to just your south and so on, just before the city center, still going to be a challenge because affordability plays a huge role. If the society cannot afford, they actually won't be able to move to that side. But actually, there's been a quite trend. It's influenced by a lot of things. For example, you have a lot of people now getting access into varsity. People are graduating now. People actually can earn a better salary. That's why you saw people mostly in the township being able to afford to stay. So it's influenced a lot by, the skills, equipment, and having enough disposable income based on your earnings and your salaries. That's why they were moving. But now, I think it might slow a bit. Most people might even think of downsizing. Remember, it's not only that the bond is going to go high. Also, there's other commitments, your monthly obligations, like your rates, your levies. So people consolidate everything. If it's too high for them, they end up saying, you know what, let's liquidate. Let's liquidate the property, let's sell it, let's move or let's downsize so that we can be able to afford. Because at the end of the day, people want to live comfortable. So as long as it's still hiking, I think that market might be affected.
Landlords are in an interesting position here because on the one side, they obviously are the ones who own the property. They may be paying it off, they might be renting, they might be sort of buying, they might have bought it to rent it out. But for some of them, if people who used to own a property give up the property and move back into the rental market, they'll probably be at sort of the middle to the higher end of the rental market. So that means there's more demand for rental property. How's all that going to play out? There are lots of different dynamics there for landlords.
Look, it's not a walk on the path when coming to that. Remember, certain landlords as well, remember their bond is linked to the increase in interest or the decrease in it. So as the interest goes high, meaning their bond is going high, it forces them to actually raise the rental rate because they need to meet their monthly obligation. Once they raise the rent, that class that cannot afford due to that hike, now also they are suffering. That's why you'll find that there's a lot of properties that are not rented. So it's a challenge both ways. It's not like it's going to be a walk on the path. People are going, the demand is just going to go high. No. So depending on their affordability, it will force them to shift the equilibrium either to the negative or to the positive.
What's this going to do to the construction sector as well? Because, look, people weren't allowed to build during the hard lockdown. They were during the sort of second half of it. But they would have been looking at prices going up, property prices, and thinking, well, now's a good time to build. But now, as interest rates have normalized, and I use the word normalized, I realize it feels worse than that, but they are normalizing. I mean, I would imagine that's going to be tough.
Look, remember it starts at, getting access, giving the society access to loanable funds. If you have a certain percentage cut out of that market, that means the actual demand of real estate is going to lower, which is going to affect construction. Because construction is based on demand and supply. If there's no demand for the real estate, it's going to be difficult for them to continually supply. So obviously, we were looking at construction slowing a bit based on the demand that is not coming. So the minute people can access, I think construction is going to rise. So we need to look at the trend from now going forward, see if it's going to go down or it's going to keep on going up.
It's difficult to build anyway with the construction mafia in so many parts of the country at the moment.
Exactly.
There are so many different things that are happening. And the one thing that we're seeing is that food price inflation is very high. Now, that wouldn't normally affect the property market. But food is the one thing you have to buy. You have to buy food.
Definitely.
So you need really probably three things, definitely, right? So you need food, you need a place to live, and you need clothes, particularly for your children, school uniforms. It's been that season, all of that. So if you've got high food price inflation, people aren't going to have enough money to pay rent. They're not going to have enough money generally just to pay a bond. There's going to be a lot more pressure on this entire sector as we see a lot more pressure on our economy generally.
Look, that's why when you even apply for origination of a bond, there's certain questions they ask. Even the food budget is asked because your disposable income is affected by your day-to-day operations and also your monthly obligations. So the minute the food prices goes up, obviously it's going to reduce whatever that's going to be left after those basic costs. So looking at people obviously not being able to afford again, because that's one of the metrics or the data the bank or any bond originators need to actually understand your affordability. So hike in price food obviously is going to affect the real estate. More people might not be able to afford. It ups back to maybe downsizing as well. People having to downsize so they can afford their stomach and they be able to afford the shelter. So it's quite a balance. You need to know your economics of the house as well. What are the needs? What are the wants? What do you need the most? What do you not need the most?
No, I mean, you also need to be able to afford transport. So you really, certain areas where there's work, if people are still in work, there's going to be all sorts of strange things. Yeah. Do you think, after everything that's happened, the last 3 years, right, so we've had the pandemic, then we've had the economic situation we're in now, which is partly the pandemic, partly the war in Ukraine. Are we going to see fundamental changes in the property sector as a result? Are we seeing something shifting that we maybe didn't see before?
Look, when you say property or real estate, it's very broad. For example, student accommodation was affected differently when coming to the pandemic. So there was a lot of uncertainty. We're not sure whether is it going to be the new normal for students to study at home, work online, and just like that. So obviously the demand, we are not sure if it's going to come back or not. So the rate of development in terms of student accommodation got affected because of uncertainty. So obviously due to the past 3 years, I can say that most people capitalized during pandemic when the interest was low. So people were buying now. So obviously it's like any other business. It's going to go up, eventually it's going to go down. The minute our economy comes stabilized, eventually we're going to realize that lower interest rate and it's going to go back again. So it's more like a fluctuation. If it's going to go up, it's steadily going up for several years. It's not going to be by a huge difference. It's going to be very small, but in between, we're going to have that oscillation of going down. Because remember as well, it affects the whole economy, the banking sector, everything, the Reserve Bank, everybody is getting affected. So at some point, they need to relax it a bit so that they can open a certain economy. When you're constraining certain portion of the economy, especially in real estate, eventually it's going to affect everything. So if you can check, they're very smart about it. So even if it goes high, there's target market or there's something they're trying to adjust. Eventually, when they reach what they want to adjust, they take it down so that they can take it back to that downfall so that they can go back and reach certain objectives and target of being it downwards. And then it will always oscillate like that.
No, Molefe, I'm so glad someone's optimistic in these times. I do want to ask, So obviously during the pandemic, people saw it as a good time to buy property. They
Yeah.
saw it as a good time to buy property, particularly first-time homeowners. Interest rates were low. That pushed prices in certain areas up. Is now a good moment to buy property if you have the capital because of everything that's going on?
Look, I'll say that people who have, the means of buying, the power, the financial power, actually a certain market won't be able to have a lot of demand, so they have a choice of choosing. So if you have money right now, it's easier for you to say you've got options. There's plenty in the sea right now. So for some people who have money, it's still a good time for them to buy because of options. But in terms of the interest rate, I wouldn't say it's a good time. It's not a good time, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen in the next 3 years. Because, everything go up. So you don't know in the next 3 years where it will be. For that uncertainty, if you can buy, if it's comfortable, buy now. Because you don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. If it goes high in the next 3 years, you're still going to regret yourself. So if it's comfortable, you have enough disposable income, I would say buy. Buy because you don't know what's going to happen. But the fortunate part is for those who have financial power, a certain market, the demand is going to be low. They can even influence the price because certain property will be on the market for 3 or 6 months. Yeah. Obviously, the seller gets frustrated. People have buying power now, they dictate. They can say, I'm buying it 20% less or 10% less. So that's the reality that we're going to see.
Capital always wins. In the end.
Exactly.
The rich person is always the one who can hold on for longest.
Yes.
Molefe Moate, thanks very much indeed. Yeah. The founder and director of Lifelizabeth Properties. More reaction, of course, to that decision by the Monetary Policy Committee of the Reserve Bank.